We just take a moment to center ourselves, just take a breath, and ask for the peace of the Almighty. All peace begins in our own hearts. We pray, prayer of Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where doubt, faith. Despair, hope. Darkness, light. Sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console. To be understood as to understand. To be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning we are pardoned. In dying we are born to eternal life. Relying on great power this day, the power that comes from community, and the power of the Almighty that works in and through us as we work together to solve difficult problems. We gather in the name of goodness. Let everyone say amen. 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 Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father, for those words. As I mentioned before, my name is Jeremy Lee, and I'm National President for Latino and co-founder of the 80% Coalition. For Latino is one of the many, over 38 organizations now, that are members of this very important Wisconsin coalition. We're a coalition of businesses, of health, service, advocacy organizations, and more that have come together to say enough. It's time for us all to come together and address the issue squarely head-on of gun violence. I'm joined here today with leaders from a number of different coalition members, including Deborah Gillespie, founder of Mothers Against Gun Violence. Deborah, where are you? Yeah. Jenny Hoffman-Jonas and all the great members over at Moms Demand Action, thank you for joining us. Byron Marshall, third vice president of the NAACP Milwaukee branch. Nick and Tyler from the Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort and Educational Fund, and so many others. So thank you all for coming out this morning. So greatly appreciated. Let me begin by saying that the last time many of us were together was last week, as we were all paying our final respects to one of Milwaukee's favorite sons. He was a victim of but one of the many acts of gun violence we've seen recently against members of law enforcement. In Idaho, we learned of firefighters that were targeted, shot, and murdered. This follows elected officials and their spouses that were just recently shot at our neighboring state in Minnesota. Shortly thereafter, we learned that members of our own congressional delegation were on that shooter's list as well. 2 nights ago, we saw more lives taken just a few blocks from where we're standing right now, in a very busy business district here in the city. And as of this morning, we learned of yet another child who lost his life due to an accidental shooting with a firearm that wasn't stored properly. Today we gather not only to raise our voices, but to reclaim our shared responsibility. Because gun violence in America no longer hides in the shadows. It has invaded classrooms. It's invaded congregations, parades, and police stations. It has pierced the hearts of families and stolen the futures of so many children, and turned routine calls for help into life or death risks for our first responders. No one is untouched by this violence. Law enforcement officers now face militarized firepower on routine traffic stops. Paramedics and firefighters find themselves in harm's way simply for answering the call. In our communities, we're mourning our sons, our daughters, our teachers, our students, our neighbors, and our parishioners. Every loss is not just a personal tragedy, but it represents a failure. Our failure to come together and act. But we know what works. Common sense measures that are proven to save lives. Common sense measures such as universal background checks, red flags, and so much more. And while there's no one single bullet that will resolve this issue, they are proven to save lives. If we're truly to address this issue, it will take all of us coming together to say enough. That is why this morning I'm proud to publicly announce, and I'd like to invite Mayor Kevin Johnson to come join me, and representatives from the Office of Community Wellness and Safety to come on up. So I'm so proud to publicly announce that the 80% Coalition is hosting this year's 2025 Emergency Gun Violence Summit right here in the great city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we're so honored that the Office of Community Wellness and Safety is coming on this year to be a presenting sponsor. So thank you all once again for that support. And I'd like to present to the both of you a commemorative Emergency Gun Violence Summit book that we had created from last year's event, in which the mayor spoke so eloquently. So once again, thank you for your continued support and making us part of your comprehensive strategy to address gun violence here in the city of Milwaukee.
Thank you.
I also want to thank Sheldon and Marianne Lubar, Susan Lubar, Madeline and David Lubar, and Joan Lubar and John Crouch for their very generous donation, which is helping to make the summit possible as well. The summit will be held on October 15th here at the Baird Center, and with the exception of the luncheon, it's very important everybody hear this. The entire event is free. We want everyone coming and learning from the valuable information we'll be providing. You're still required to register, but the event is free with the exception of the luncheon. At the summit, participants will hear from local, state, and national policy experts, elected officials, students, veterans, survivors, and so many more. There'll be more than a dozen panel discussions and workshops that will address everything from school safety to domestic violence to child, adult, and veteran suicide, community violence intervention strategies, legislative solutions, faith-based approaches to addressing gun violence, and so much more. Attendees will also hear from emergency room doctors and nurses, and mental health professionals, and first responders. It is for this full breadth of information and programming that our event, our Emergency Gun Violence Summit, has earned the reputation of being one of the most comprehensive and impactful gun violence prevention events nationwide. So registration, as of about 12 minutes ago, is now open. If you want more information, if you want to register and reserve your seat at this important event, please go to www.emergencygunviolencesummit.org and register today. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us working together if we want to keep our families, keep our children, our schools, our houses of worship, and our places of work safe. So we invite you to join us for this very important event. It's now my great honor to invite the great mayor of the great city of Milwaukee to come and make remarks. Mayor Kevin Johnson. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Daryl. Thank you to the 80% Coalition, and really all of our partners who have joined us here today, not just for the announcement about the summit taking place here in the city later this year, but continuing to call to action the challenges that we face, not just in Milwaukee, but in Wisconsin and the United States around guns and gun violence. Guns are involved in a disproportionate amount and share of the violence that we see here in the city. Guns are used to threaten, they're used to shoot, they're used to kill too many people. And I've repeated constantly that I want guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. Again, people who should not have them. I'm not talking about law-abiding citizens, I'm talking about criminals who should not have guns and otherwise would use those guns to harm people in our community. I want guns out of the hands of people like, unfortunately, Daryl mentioned this, young people who had them the other day that resulted in the death of a 13-year-old here in Milwaukee just last night. It was the last message that I got from the police before I went to bed last night. A 13-year-old lost their life. I want people like 39-year-old Dante Gladney disarmed. Now, Gladney is accused of shooting and wounding Milwaukee police officer Sam Schwabenlander just last month. He's the person that I said was too damn old to be running around here, brandishing weapons and causing mayhem and destruction here in our community and hurting one of our brave police officers. Gladney had 2 previous convictions for being a felon in possession of a firearm. That was before he shot Officer Schwabenlander. So that's the thing that I've been thinking about in my head. Why would somebody who has that sort of rap sheet, 2 previous convictions for being a felon in possession of a firearm, Why was he then able to still get his hands on a gun and then end up shooting and harming one of our police officers who was out there doing his job and working to make neighborhoods safer when people have been calling for that sort of action? I want people like Ralph Taylor Jr. disarmed. Ralph Taylor Jr. Is accused of first-degree intentional homicide for murder, and the murder of his 4-year-old son just last week. And yeah, he too was previously convicted of being a felon in possession of a firearm. Again, why is a felon who should not have had his hands on a gun in possession of a firearm? We need to do more work to make sure these people do not get their hands on these deadly weapons, and that's what they are. It's far too easy for those folks who shouldn't have their hands on guns to get their hands on them. So background checks, they've got to be a must for every single gun purchase. That's not a crazy thing. These are deadly weapons. There should be more things that we do to make sure that folks trying to get their hands on these weapons have some sort of checks. Gun owners, legitimate gun owners, they must be responsible in securing their weapons in order to reduce the chance that these guns are stolen. And it takes more than laws, more than policing. It takes family members, it takes neighbors, it takes community groups, it takes religious organizations, everyone to step up to make sure that guns are not used in anger. And I think that we have the capacity to do that in Milwaukee. And I think that not just because I'm hopeful, I'm thinking that because I'm optimistic, because what we saw just last week when the 7-year-old young man was abducted, and this entire community came together, rallied around to make sure that young man was brought home safely. If we harness that same sort of energy, that same sort of passion into working to make sure that folks that we know, whether they're friends or family members, that they don't get their hands on the gun, and if they do, that they don't use them, they don't act out like that, they don't hurt people. Just imagine what we could do for public safety in Milwaukee. I think we've got tremendous opportunity to do a lot more in the community. But we got to make sure that guns are not used to settle arguments, these petty disputes, as the police department and Chief Norman generally would say. Or you get too many people who have poor conflict resolution skills and then rely on a gun in order to settle that dispute. Because it used to be back in the day when I was growing up that you either walked away, maybe you yelled and left it at that. Probably at worst, you had a fist fight and you had a bloody nose, but you didn't kill somebody, right? You got the chance to live to tell the story. But now, I guess people can't fight anymore, and they decide to take out the guns and settle disputes. It's like, that's wrong. It's wrong, and it's something that all of us have to work together to stop. So we got to make sure that guns are properly secured with gun locks, which are free for people in this community. You can go to a number of community-based organizations in order to get them, no questions asked. There's not an excuse. So if you're not using a gun lock, then put them in a gun safe, and most of all, nowhere near kids, nowhere near children, much like we discussed about the teenager who was just shot and killed in the city just recently. And as we're thinking about all these things, as we constantly talk about all these things, and we're engaging in these robust conversations like the summit that's going to come up, what I hear in Madison is silence. What I hear in Washington, D.C. is silence. Those in power must seriously look at our gun laws and make the changes necessary in order to protect human life, in order to make sure that our kids are not in harm's way, in order to make sure that our police officers are not put into harm's way. It doesn't make sense that our law enforcement officers responsible for keeping the peace in our neighborhoods are confronted with military-style weapons. It does not make sense, and it's not fair to them when they're going out to make our communities safer. Local governments don't have that authority. We don't control gun law locally. That's entirely in the hands of people at the state and federal government levels. But I believe that we can be safer. So many steps are underway to prevent. Many steps are underway to intervene and hold accountable those folks who do make the decision. And it is a choice to engage in this sort of violence. So yes, there are fewer people who are being shot in Milwaukee. But no one can be satisfied until shootings are even more rare, until residents are no longer fearful, and until guns are no longer misused in our city, hurting people, including kids and including our police officers. That's something that all of us should be able to commit to. With that, I'm going to ask Assistant Chief of Police Nicole Waldner to come to the mic. Chief.
You heard the mayor refer to the text message he got last night, and I want to put a little more context to the 13-year-old that was shot and killed yesterday. She was shot and killed by a 14-year-old. Yep, and the other person present was another 14-year-old. So these are the things we're talking about, and I'm glad the mayor clarified about we're not saying no guns, we've become the anti-gun duo, you know, but we're saying it's got to a level that it's out of control and that our kids aren't safe, our officers aren't safe. Additional context to the officer he referred to on 46 in Hampton that was shot now, I want to say about 3 weeks ago. There were 2 shootings in that exact place prior to our officer being shot. In one case, the shooter was 14 years old. And that's when I referred to, there were other people in the store that were carrying their guns just under their armpit. That this is what it's become. And it was a kid. So you can call on that. No matter how you feel about guns, kids can't carry them. So call us. We will come. We want to know. We want to intervene. And so that area has gotten a lot of attention. And I was happy to hear last week at a meeting, one of our community partners from Office of Community Wellness and Safety told me that one of the neighbors said she will only let her kids play in that park across the street from her house in that neighborhood if we are there. And that is light years away from 2020, right? So something is happening. The community trust is vested in our hands. They're trusting us. They're trusting the community wellness. They're trusting all of the community groups that are out there. And I think that this coalition and this summit gives us all the opportunity to be in the same space to talk about this. Because whether you live in the city or you don't, there is no way this doesn't affect you. There's no way you can hear about a 13-year-old being shot and not feel something. Or that a dad shot a 4-year-old. And unfortunately, all the officers and all the detectives that I work with know that intimately. So we may not be in that family, but we feel this every single day, and it takes its toll. And then when we're getting shot trying to intervene, or people are taking attempts, it makes you take a step back, but we still go to work every day. And we'll be at the coalition, and we'll be at the summit, and we will be engaged in this conversation whenever you'll have us, because I'm open to any new ideas. But the chief has always said, he said this since our violent crime plan was out initially, if you're an adult and you have responsibility for a child and your child has a gun and you're going to jail. Whether you stay there or not in my hands, I wish it was, but you will be going to jail. And those accountable who are giving felons guns because they are able to buy them, then you will go to jail also. Sorry I couldn't end on a positive note, but that's where it goes.
Good.
Good morning, I'm Skylar Belot, Assistant Chief of the Milwaukee Fire Department. I appreciate you guys inviting the fire department out to kind of discuss sort of our side of things as first responders and what we see and deal with. And I have a couple of my own personal stories that, family and friends affected by violence as well. So firefighters and paramedics work hard and train regularly to best care for our citizens on a daily basis. We have resources throughout the city ready to respond and care for whatever the need may be. Traumatic injuries are some of the most concerning and challenging call times for us. We recently began carrying whole blood on 2 of our paramedic units in the city of Milwaukee to address traumatic injuries to help improve those outcomes, and we're starting to see some of that in play. And this is part of a larger mission throughout the county with our shared services partners as well, getting those initial resources to treat the injuries after the fact. Obviously, we're all here to discuss how we can prevent it in the first place, but the reality is there's an impact on the backside and how we respond. As we've heard from others, the impact goes far beyond the injuries to that individual. It's their family, it's the neighborhood, it's the community, it's schools, it's workplaces, it's the police department, fire department. Our families are impacted, our neighborhoods are impacted, our firefighters are impacted, and lives are changed forever. So for us, we typically are working 25 or 30 years in our career as firefighters. And the continued violence has a cumulative effect on our first responders. This is the fire department, police department, other law enforcement, hospital staff, people that live and work in the city. And internally, we try our best to manage that through our peer support, and the city offers EAP services, so we're getting a lot better at dealing with that, but the impacts are, as I stated, beyond just the victims themselves. I've been to several of the officer-involved shootings where MPD has lost officers, and it's heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to them. I couldn't possibly imagine. It's awful. My own family has been impacted by gun violence. 28 years ago, while I was in the training academy, my cousin was shot and was paralyzed. And my aunt's been dealing with that for 28 years now, caring for him. And he hasn't had the opportunity to live his life and fulfill any of his potential, much like the rest of the people in the city that have gone through similar circumstances. Beyond my family, one of our firefighters who was, I was working one day, who was off duty in the city of Milwaukee, somebody attempting to steal his vehicle, he was shot. That trauma, that after, the effects of that carry through with him on the job, as well as the things he sees on a regular basis working here. Another one of our firefighters had experience, being shot at while at work, similar to the police department. And what it comes down to is how do we get people in the community to take a hold of this, have responsibility for yourselves, for your children, securing your weapons, conflict resolution as they discuss things that will come up in the summit. We have to find better ways to deal with our problems because the way things have been going and the result of it are just, it's too much for the city to bear. And getting everybody involved from the community and our partners and families the most, you're in the homes with your kids and other friends and family members. Speak out, take action, do what you can to help us prevent this tragedy for the families in the city. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenda Castelli, Superintendent, Milwaukee Public Schools. And I want to thank Forward Latino and the 80% Coalition, our faith leaders who are behind us here, first responders, and police, especially our SROs who protect our kids every single day, the elected leaders for standing together on this critical issue. And thank you, Mayor Johnson, for your leadership and your call to action. I also want to thank the Lubar family for helping make the Emergency Gun Violence Summit possible. We just cannot do this work alone, and our kids deserve every single person, every single Milwaukeeans and state officials' attention on this very issue. This issue came to my attention as the new superintendent when I was sitting at a board meeting. When we take a moment of silence for our children. And I'm sitting there down, getting the moment of silence, and they're reading the names. And I'm expecting to raise my head and begin the meeting. And I'm still with my head down, and the names keep getting read, and read, and read, and read. And I thought, why is this going on? What are all these names? And then it was the next board meeting, and we had the moment of silence. And the same damn thing happened. We heard children's names being read again and again and again. And I went to my staff and I asked, how many children have died to gun violence this year? 24 were on that list. So then I went and I looked at what is overall Milwaukee's homicide rate. 43% are children. This is not acceptable. This is absolutely not acceptable. We can't educate our children when they're not coming into our classrooms. Every day, Milwaukee Public Schools serves over 68,000 students. I'm sorry. Too many of them are living with the constant fear and trauma of gun violence in their neighborhoods and in their homes too. This violence isn't just something our students hear about on the news. It walks in their classrooms, it follows them home, and it weighs on them. I've heard students tell me over and over again that they hear gunshots all night long, and it keeps them up at night. It weighs on their families, and it's impacting their futures. We see the impact in our classrooms, in disruptive learning, in rising anxiety among our children, their mental health, and in students struggling to see a future for themselves. It impacts our attendance rates. It creates perception that it has to be this way. Let us all be crystal clear. It doesn't have to be this way. We must acknowledge that this is a public health crisis. And we can solve it. We can create a new normal for our children. And we can be an example right here in Milwaukee for getting that done. Gun violence is stealing the potential of our young people before they even get a chance to show the world what they can do. Students who experience violence or even live in its shadow are more likely to miss school, fall behind in their studies, and face emotional and behavioral challenges. Our teachers are not just teaching math and reading, they're helping students cope with grief, anxiety, and fear every single day. Schools cannot solve this crisis. We need everyone. It takes all of us, educators, parents, faith leaders, first responders, elected officials to do their jobs and start restricting these guns, and community members to create safe environments for our children to deserve. That is why this summit matters. It's a chance to listen, it's a chance to learn, and most importantly, to act so that every child in Milwaukee can grow up free from fear and have the opportunity to thrive. At MPS, we will be putting resources and supports in place to do our part to change this pattern of violence that our students experience far too often. And we can do this if we're intentional about it. Having the very best educators in our classrooms so that our students are excited to come to school. Offering a world-class arts and athletics experiences so that students are yearning for and keeps them busy and engaged. Having excellent after-school programs so that families can rely on them and that they're in safe environments. Having trusted adults in our schools, from educators, school leaders, school psychologists, school social workers, and our school resource officers that our students can turn to when they are in need. By offering engaging and fun summer learning experiences and summer job experiences right here in the city. And then creating a safety hub so that all those systems speak together and so that we can ensure that our buildings are protected. The darkness of violence flourishes when we don't provide opportunity and access to young people and their families, and we don't share best information. It is apathy and people not realizing the severity of the problem. Our children deserve more than moments of silence and empty promises. They deserve real change. On behalf of all of the committed educators and staff in Milwaukee Public Schools, we are proud to stand with all of you in this fight, to protect our students, to safeguard their futures, and to give them the peace that they need to learn, grow, and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent, for those very moving and impactful remarks. Before I wrap things up and open up the floor to questions, I want to dispel two myths. Number one, I, like the majority of the members of the 80% Coalition, own a number of firearms. I grew up hunting with my family and my father. I passed that tradition along to my children. So this isn't an anti-gun movement. It's an anti-gun violence movement, right? And it's impacting us each and every family. Almost to a person, every time I meet with a gun violence survivor, the first thing they ask me is, why hasn't somebody done something already? Help us get this done so I don't have to worry about you uttering those words one day. Number two, while we've talked about a lot of local examples of gun violence here, it's clear, the numbers don't lie. The number one reason lives are lost to firearms in the state of Wisconsin is not from what people would consider murder or criminal activity. It's from adults taking their own lives with firearms. The overwhelming number of those folks live in rural communities. They're older individuals. To be frank, they're white, older gentlemen. The reason you don't hear about it on the news, I think we all understand, is out of respect for those families. But it's happening in every county, in every district throughout the state of Wisconsin. So if you think this is a city issue or a black and brown issue, you are sadly mistaken. This is a Wisconsin issue that we all need to address together. So with that being said, we'll now go ahead and open up the floor to members of the accredited press for any questions you may have.